China in many ways is awakening from a long period of relative inactivity in international affairs. What we need to understand is that China is an ancient and proud nation, and they're not going to be pushed aside or pushed around by anyone. They're not going to accept American hegemony. They're not going to accept America's dictates. When countries say that it's China upsetting the balance, we need to look at it historically, and we need to look at what really is provocation. Who is the most provocative? For many years now, the Americans have been sailing the aircraft carriers up and down the East China Sea or the South China Sea. I don't know how far over the sea you can see those great huge carriers, but I suspect you can stay outside the 12-mile limit and still be seen from the mainland. And here we are, there's nothing you can do about it. Now, Chinese almost certainly regard that as provocation. The Americans regard it as a right. The Chinese one day will have their own carrier. If they sailed that up and down the east coast of the United States, the Americans would go paranoid. The American pivot, the renewed American militarization of the Western Pacific, the stationing of more advanced missile-firing ships within the region makes the pursuit of peace a good deal more difficult. China's assertiveness in relation to the East or South China Seas in more recent times is, in a sense, a response to the American pivot, because the Americans are trying to give the impression we can protect you against everything. If the Chinese can demonstrate, as Hugh White was saying, that America cannot or will not protect them against anything, then the Americans get exposed as an empty vessel, full of words but no action. Last time I was in China, Secretary of State Clinton was leading a series of discussions in China, a strategic and economic dialogue, and that went quite well. But the Chinese said to me, which America do we believe? The strategic and economic dialogue America or the containment America? American spokesmen come out to Australia and they say we have a good relationship with Japan, with Australia, with all the countries in between, with Singapore. We're developing a strategic relationship with India. And then they say, but China's the problem. The militarization of the region makes it much harder to solve the problems throughout the region. Because, bringing the Senkaku Islands, as the Japanese call them, within the American security guarantee gives the Japanese, who are now newly assertive, newly militaristic, and already with a very powerful military, more powerful than any European power, which not many people realize, it gives them even added confidence, and therefore they're not likely to want to resolve the issue by negotiation. President Obama should have said to the Japanese, look, of course the security guarantee is absolute, but you have to recognize there's a dispute over those islands. You have to be prepared either to talk directly to China or subject the issue to international arbitration. Now, the Chinese may not have accepted either, but they would have certainly regarded that position as an enormous advance and maybe an effort to achieve some sort of equity in the issue. But that would not be the position today when the Americans have backed the Japanese. ASEAN has been seeking to negotiate a code of conduct for the South China Sea. They've been in discussions with China in relation to it. But the pivot makes it harder to achieve agreement. I suppose in older times, a war involved the whole nation. But in the post-Second World War era, the war only involves a small part of the nation. Vietnam certainly involved conscripts and therefore involved many people, many families right across Australia. But the other conflicts we've been involved in, pleasing America in Iraq, with most tragic and dire consequences, which we can see right at this moment, and in Afghanistan, which is almost certainly in Iraq in waiting, they involve a very, very small part of the population. The rest of us go on our own way without really understanding that we have people fighting, people killing, and sometimes being killed. So I suppose one of the reasons why we think we're a peaceful, loving nation is because, we say when we have been involved in war, we fought for peace. I'm not sure that was true in Vietnam, in retrospect, with what I now know, but did not really know then. And it certainly wasn't true in Afghanistan, because that was a war based on a lie. And what many people knew to be a lie at the time, and tens of thousands of Australians marched against it, but the government of the day ignored all of that. So, while we like to think we're a peaceful nation, the record doesn't support that as well as it should. If an Australian government said, no, we're not going to be involved, we're going to pass this one by, as the Canadians passed by Iraq and Vietnam in much earlier times, that would not be believable by the Chinese, for example. And it would not be believable because of that task force in Darwin, which is a hard-hitting task force that could not just demonstrate, but exercise power anywhere throughout the whole region. And also because of the current uses to which Pine Gap is put. Pine Gap used to be collecting information, and only collecting information. It wasn't used for targeting missiles. It's now used for targeting a variety of United States and often offensive weapon systems. Japanese are a different matter because they're a much more powerful nation in their own right, and they are nearly aggressive. America should be seeking to restrain Japan, not seeking to encourage Japan, as Obama's last visit certainly would have. And that is why the United States, if there's a conflict in our part of the world, has the capacity to force us into a war which would be diametrically opposed to Australian interests.